title of my talk is Visualizing Health Equity, talking about visual storytelling toward a more equitable New York. And I come from a field in between science and art, the field of architecture, so I'll be talking about how some of my work has approached the questions we're looking at today. So amidst appalling health disparities and dwindling public support for well-designed housing, I can think of no more urgent issues in architecture than asserting our discipline's value in the realm of public health. There's currently a 9-year difference in life expectancies in East Harlem and the Upper East Side. This must end. I'm going to go for this crowd. I'll go through these slides very quickly, but looking at correlations between income and diseases like diabetes, and looking at how are our life expectancies predicted, and noting that the best predictor of our health is where we live. And so, looking at this kind of work, for me, started a little while ago. I'm dating myself a little bit, but over a decade ago, I worked on a project called New Housing in New York. I helped to lead it. It was the city's first competition for sustainable and affordable housing. It resulted in this project called Via Verde, or the Green Way, that is in the South Bronx, designed by Datner and Grimshaw. And so this is a project that looks at how a building can really embody and promote health. And it became a test case for the city's active design guidelines. So this was something, this is a showcase for housing design and healthier living that sort of kickstarted this aspect of my career. And I've had the privilege of working with some people in the audience. Most of my work is, in the last several years, has been working with city agencies on projects that connect architecture and health, and more broadly, design and social justice. And these are some of the publications that I've either contributed to as an editor or writer for the city, and I take a variety of roles: designer, strategist, project manager, editor, writer, professor, whatever sort of necessary. And so these are projects that are connecting these areas. And I want to take a quick look at my book that came out recently. We heard about a different kind of intervention. This work looks at housing as intervention, architecture towards social equity. So this was a 17-essay volume of architectural design, looking at how housing projects and the design processes behind them might be interventions toward greater social equity. And the basis for this is looking at how housing's primary position in our lives, economies, and the built environment makes it a natural site of intervention in the complex fight against systemic injustices. And the work looks at two questions. How can housing projects and the design processes behind them be interventions towards greater social equity? And for any architects in the room, in the face of persistent social inequities worldwide, what can we do? So I'm just going to look at one example, to pull out some pieces from one of the essays produced by ISA Architects in Philadelphia. So ISA does very beautiful work, and I could talk about this from an architectural perspective and why it's so beautiful, etc. But instead, I'm going to go behind the scenes and first show you a project that ISA did. And this is working collaboratively with Rupal Sangvi, who's trained in public health and has a firm called Health by Design. So this is a speculative project called Healthy Urbanism that looks at how some of this work is going to be visualizing what we just heard about and saw bullet points in the last presentation. So looking at how can we take some of the science that we're learning and design toward that. And then pulling that into an easy-to-use toolkit. So as we're working, as we're designing, as architects are making design decisions, how can we make them in a way that will produce better health outcomes and reduce health inequality? So to take a couple of examples here, looking at something that might, how can you design your spaces to help people connect socially, relating to the idea of social cohesion that we heard in the previous example, and also ways that the built environment can be redesigned to encourage movement and provide opportunities for physical activity. So back to the most urgent questions here. I'll finish with some of the stuff that I'm working on now. I have the pleasure now of teaching a studio course supporting artists working in Portland. The title is Rebuilding Cornerstones Towards Spatial Justice for Portland's Black Diaspora. So this is looking at a combination of cultural programming, the creation of cultural spaces, and affordable housing, and what that can do to address massive, I can tell you about it, it's even worse than here, awful histories of displacement, etc. Also working on a new book project. So again, I'm very interested in how housing can be an intervention in the questions that we're talking about today. So the last project I worked on was global. I'm now focusing in on the United States, and I would love to talk with anyone whose work interacts with this. I'm working to produce a new version of this sort of seminal book called Good Neighbors, bringing together the best work in the United States of affordable housing and an authoritative volume of case studies. And then back to the title of the talk, I want to introduce a project that we're developing called Visualizing Health Equity. We heard from Iobi in the first panel about the importance of storytelling. So this is taking that and merging it with the skills that architects can bring to the table to look at how visual storytelling can contribute to a more equitable New York, or for now, a more equitable Portland, where I'm hanging out for the moment. So this is just beginning, but what we're doing is looking at the interconnected scales of the individual, the building, the neighborhood, and the city, and we're at the stage of developing partnerships with community groups, et cetera, to work toward this. And I'm showing an example of the kind of publication that we're going toward. So thanks very much for the invitation to present a little bit today and to hear from all of you all. Yeah, I'm interested to talk to anyone who's interested in housing as intervention and built environment as intervention. Thank you.